Imagine for a second that you're a late 19th century neurologist living in Vienna. You're peering deep into the human mind and you're about to make a discovery so profoundly unsettling it's going to permanently shatter how humanity views itself. You are Sigmund Freud, and you're about to realize that human free will, at least how we've always understood it, is kind of an illusion. In this explainer, we're diving into a really cinematic psychological investigation into the dark secrets of the unconscious mind. We're going to trace exactly how a terrifying historical realization actually evolved into modern hardbacked cognitive science.
L'io non è padrone in casa propria. The ego is not master in its own house. Freud concluded that literally everything we consider us, our conscious thoughts, our deliberate choices, it's all merely a surface quality. Psychoanalysis, as he laid out in his 1923 work, couldn't just locate the essence of the mind in consciousness, because consciousness is just a tiny room in this massive, sprawling mansion, and you don't even have the keys to most of the doors. The true driving forces behind your behavior are unseen, repressed impulses that operate entirely in the dark, and they are constantly exerting pressure on you without your explicit permission.
Now, this wasn't just some random philosophical guess, right? It was actually rooted in the cutting-edge physics of the day. Back in the 1870s, scientists like Helmholtz were establishing the principle of the conservation of physical energy, the idea that energy in a closed system isn't ever destroyed, it just moves around or changes form. Well, Freud, who was studying under Ernst Brücke, took a radical conceptual leap. He asked, what if the human personality is also a closed energy system? So looking at this timeline, these aren't just dry academic milestones. It's a tense mapping of a closed system actively battling its own primitive drives. By the time Freud published The Ego and the Id in 1923, and his daughter Anna Freud outlined The Ego and the Mechanisms of Defense in 1936, they had essentially mapped out a mind at war with itself, a place where psychic energy, if it's denied one outlet, will explosively force its way out of another.
What's absolutely fascinating here is the sheer scale of the backlash this idea caused. We can compare it to the Copernican blow. When Copernicus proved the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, it was this massive hit to our cosmic narcissism. Well, the Freudian blow did the exact same thing to our psychological pride. It moved the conscious ego completely away from the center of the mind. And humanity? We completely rejected it. From a psychological standpoint, you can actually view the massive global societal backlash against Freud as one giant global defense mechanism. Because we desperately wanted to believe that we were entirely rational beings, completely in control of our own destinies.
So, speaking of defense mechanisms, let's look at what they actually are. The absolutely crucial point here is that our minds are literally built to defend us from our own terrifying inner conflicts. If the external world doesn't offer any outlet for our primitive pleasure drives, which Freud called the id, or if those drives violate the moral sanctions of our superego, we experience this agonizing inner conflict. To stop us from just completely breaking down, the mind deploys these unconscious strategies. We push conflicts into the dark through repression, or maybe we channel them into work or art through sublimation, or we revert to earlier behaviors through regression. Basically, your mind is actively hiding a fierce battle from your conscious awareness just to keep you functioning. Which brings us to a pretty deeply unsettling question. Think about it. If our conscious self is just a surface feature, and our behaviors are really the results of repressed drives and unseen defense mechanisms, if we aren't masters of our minds, who is? Who is actually pulling the levers in the dark? It's the kind of question that makes you feel incredibly isolated inside your own head. But we don't actually have to stay in the 1920s to find the answer. Let's fast forward and see what modern science has to say about the stranger living in your brain.
In 1998, psychologist Drew Weston published a real game-changer of a paper in the Psychological Bulletin, and he opened it with this fantastic line. Freud, like Elvis, has been dead for a number of years. Weston points out a really fascinating twist in modern psychology. Popular media and critics love to treat Freud like a relic. They write his intellectual obituary over and over again by attacking his outdated 1920s views, things like his literal interpretations of phallic symbols or his dual instinct theory. But the twist is that while the archaic version of Freud is definitely dead, his darkest secrets, the core architecture of the unconscious that he discovered, have actually survived. They've evolved and they've secretly conquered modern psychology.
And here is where this chilling narrative gets grounded in cold, hard academic proof. Weston's research reveals that modern cognitive science doesn't disprove the horror of the unconscious mind at all. It empirically validates it. Today, psychoanalysis is no longer a single monolithic dogma. Instead, it's evolved into contemporary psychodynamic theory, which is defined by 5 core theoretical postulates. These are the foundational propositions that have genuinely stood the test of time, and they are backed by an enormous body of research across cognitive, social, and developmental psychology. So today, psychoanalysis has evolved into what international scholars often refer to as I 5 pilastri psicodinamici actuali, the 5 current psychodynamic pillars. Number 1, much of our mental life is unconscious. Number 2, mental processes operate in parallel and produce conflict. Number 3, childhood experiences shape our personality. Number 4, we rely on mental representations of ourselves and others. And number 5, personality involves developmental trajectories. Now, I don't want you to think of these as dry academic concepts. Think of them as the modern, scientifically proven versions of the hidden demons Freud first tried to categorize a century ago. Let's quickly break them down.
Starting with Pillar 1, the unconscious domain. Basically, cognitive neuroscience has unequivocally confirmed that a massive amount of our mental life, like implicit memories and motives, operates entirely in the dark. Moving on to Pillar 2, the modular mind and conflict. Your mind is essentially a modular battleground, constantly engaged in subconscious warfare between competing neural networks that want totally different things at the exact same time.
And the result of that warfare is something called compromise formation. This is honestly one of the most important concepts in contemporary psychodynamic theory. We really like to think our behaviors are our conscious, rational choices, right? But in reality, the things we do and even the psychological symptoms we develop are often just temporary, unconscious compromises. Your brain is desperately trying to juggle a million things. It wants to satisfy your desires, maintain your self-esteem, obey moral rules, and escape unpleasant emotions, all at the exact same time. The action you finally take is just an uneasy truce struck between these warring factions in the dark.
Next, we have Pillars 3 and 4. Childhood origins and mental phantoms. This just means early childhood experiences hardwire how you represent yourself and others, leaving us haunted by unconscious phantoms of our past relationships.
And finally, Pillar 5, the evolution of survival. This frames human growth as a treacherous, lifelong journey from complete infantile dependence to mature interdependence as we learn to navigate connection.
So that leaves us here, at the end of our exploration, with a thought that I hope makes you squirm just a little bit. If modern cognitive science and contemporary psychodynamics literally prove that we are largely driven by unconscious processes, conflicting motives, and phantoms of our past, what does it truly mean to know thyself? We've seen today that you are a closed energy system, a site of parallel conflict, and a creature of deep, implicit habits. So the next time you make a choice, ask yourself, is this really me deciding, or is it just the most recent compromise negotiated by the stranger living in my head? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope it sparks some profound curiosity about the hidden mechanics of your own mind.